Afternoon, everyone. How can you not feel happy after hearing that song? Fortunately, I was muted so you couldn't hear me singing along. I am Patty Buchever, President of WCA. Welcome and thank you for joining us today for our special Community of Friendship presentation. We all wish that we could have been in person for this special event, but COVID interfered with our plans. But the WCA board wanted to thank you for all your support and friendship during these last difficult years. What better way than an inspirational presentation about friendship and the 2,000-year-old prescription for a long life through friendship. WCA is a unique organization, and what makes it so is all of you. So we thank you and we are grateful for you. Please join me in thanking those who made this event possible. Linda Simon for her vision, attention to detail, and commitment. Robin Mintz for her spectacular and gorgeous invitation. Ann Cowan for her dedication and technical prowess. Carol Sherman for her work on the newsletter. And Marcia Morantz, Toby Kosloff, and Harriet Kleiman for their help and support. I hope I haven't left anyone out. It certainly takes a village to provide an event like this for our members. After welcome messages from Jeffrey Feld, President and CEO of the Federation, and Jane Schiff, Federation Board Chair, Dina Shane will introduce today's speaker. Jeffrey?
Thank you, Patty. It is always a pleasure for me to be able to be with the Women's Cultural Alliance. Congratulations, Patty, and all of the leadership with you of the WCA for continuing with such wonderful programming and bringing people together. It has been approximately 100 weeks of challenging times because of the pandemic. We do have an expectation of when we might be able to be in person again. These are still challenging times, and we are hopeful for when we will be able to be together, but we will continue to follow the trends. We've identified when we expect to be open, which is as of March 1st in terms of doing things in person, but again, we are still looking at the numbers and will continue to follow that. The WCA has been a stalwart of the community, of our community, holding people together even if it was only virtually, and we thank you for that. I am proud of all that the WCA continues to do for our community. Thank you so very much. We are looking forward to being in the Nina Iser Jewish Cultural Center in about sometime at the end of this year or perhaps the beginning of the next calendar year. It is going to be a wonderful opportunity for all of us to be able to be together, and certainly for the WCA to enjoy that brand new building. And of course, being in person in that brand new building. And again, I thank you for every single thing that you do. And with that, allow me to turn this over to Jane Schiff, the Federation Board Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey. It's always a delight to be with the WCA. Now, we all know that WCA means Women's Cultural Alliance. However, since I've moved to Naples, I think of it more as the Wonderful Companion Association, because I have met so many wonderful people through WCA. I look forward to the lunches I go to and to all of the events that I have attended. Every time I go, I make a new friend, and those new friends have become lifelong friends now. They're just, it's wonderful. And I remember going to one event, and there was a lady there who I knew I didn't know. I'd never met her before until I got there. And she looked at me and she said, "Jane, don't you remember me? And she gave me her maiden name. And all of a sudden, it was a lifelong friend I hadn't seen in about 60 years. So it really is my wonderful companion association, and I am so glad that we have this WCA as part of our federation. The other federations always ask me, what is it that the Naples Federation is doing differently that makes you grow and makes you special and really is a magnet for new people. And I always talk about the WCA and the MCA. And I hear from from professionals in other federations around the country, well, how can we start one of these? And I go, I have no idea. This is a unique organization in a unique city. And the reason it works is because all of us have moved here from somewhere else and we're looking for connections. We're looking for friends. We're looking to make this our new home. It is a unique opportunity. I am so grateful that WCA is part of Federation and that Federation is part of WCA. I would now like to turn this program over to my dear friend who I met through WCA, Dina Shine, and she will introduce our speaker. Dina?
It is with the greatest pleasure that I introduce to you my friend of 50 years, Rabbi Susan Nanas. Rabbi Nanas is the director of adult programs and one of 7 rabbis at Wilshire Boulevard Temple in Los Angeles. In that capacity, she teaches, preaches, and oversees all adult cultural and educational program for 2,800 families. Under her supervision, Wilshire Boulevard Temple has become a Jewish cultural center presenting concerts, films, theater, lectures, and innovating Jewish experiences for the entire city of Los Angeles. A graduate of the Yale School of Drama, Rabbi Nanas did not decide to become a rabbi until she was in her mid-50s. Before that, she was a playwright and a screenwriter in both New York and Los Angeles. Her play, The Survivor, about the Warsaw Ghetto, was performed on Broadway, off Broadway, and in Los Angeles. As a television movie writer, she had 15 movies produced on air and won 3 Christopher Awards, the Writers Guild Award for the Best Long Form Screenplay, and was a finalist for the Humanities Award. Rabbi Nanas is also a mother of her 28-year-old daughter, lovely, lovely sweetheart, Lily, which she considered her greatest achievement of all. So, ladies, I share with you my very best friend, Rabbi Nanas.
Thank you, Dina, so much for that. And hello to everyone. I'm so sorry we can't be having a lovely lunch together and then speaking in person. But this is the best we can do this year, and hopefully sometime in the future we will meet again. So I'm going to be talking today about friendship, which I know you all experience from the WCA. I'm going to begin with a story. Many years ago, when I was a young student in my Jewish day school in Chicago, one of my favorite stories was a Talmudic tale about a man called Honi the Circle Maker. One day, Honi is walking down the street when he meets an old man who is planting a carob tree. Honi asks the man how long the tree will take to bear the fruit. 70 years, answers the old fellow. Mocking him, Honi asks why he would plant a tree that he might never eat from. I was born into a world with carob trees, the man says, just as my ancestors planted trees for me, so I will plant them for my children and their children after them. Soon after, Honi eats a meal and falls asleep for decades. Upon awakening, Honi sees a different man gathering fruit from a fully grown carob tree. Did you plant that tree? He asks. No, answers the man. It was my grandfather. At that moment, Honi realizes that he'd been asleep for 70 years. So that's a beautiful story, right? A story about taking care of the land, humility and gratitude, about love and care for future generations. It was only many years later, not 70, but definitely decades, when I was in rabbinical school, that I learned the other half of the story, which they don't tell you when you're a child. After waking up, Honi wandered around his town and learned that while he was asleep, people had already mourned his death. Not only that, but his wife and children had passed away, as had all his close friends. There was no one left to recognize him, no one interested in speaking with him or befriending him, and he began to feel completely invisible. Honi's invisibility leads to depression and despair. His despair led to hopelessness and the lack of a will to go on. Unable to bear his isolation, Honi prays to God for mercy, and God hears his prayer and takes his life. This is a story in the Talmud. A few generations later, one of the rabbis, a Talmudic sage named Rava, reflects on Honi's story, and he states, "From here we understand either friendship or death." Wow, that really changed the message of the story for me and for all of us. In one simple sentence, Rava articulated one of our most basic human needs. Beyond food, beyond water, beyond clothing and shelter, we need a meaningful connection to another person. We need someone we can talk to, someone who will listen to us and whom we will listen to, someone we can share and laugh and cry with, someone who really sees us. In other words, we need a friend, or, as the Talmud tells us, we will die. Sometimes emotionally, sometimes spiritually, and sometimes, as Rava expressed, literally. For thousands of years, the Jewish tradition has understood the value, the power, and the importance of friendship. Because friendship is more than a social connection in the Jewish context. Friends offer help, loyalty, protection, support, unselfish love, and moral guidance. Judaism defines friendship as one of the primary relationships in life, a tie that can exceed the bonds of blood relatives. So a very powerful example of this is the relationship between Jewish women in the concentration camps during the Holocaust. More often than not, mothers, sisters, daughters were torn away from their families, who were often killed on the spot and left entirely alone to survive in the horrific conditions of the camps, where there was starvation and slave labor and disease. Their heads were shaved, their clothes were just rags, their normal clothes were taken away, and even their names, their identities were erased, and they were just known by a number that was tattooed on their arm. So how did the women who survived make it through those horrible experiences? Many times it was through the power of friendship. There are numerous accounts of how 2, 3, even 4, I actually read of one up to 10 women found each other in the camp and formed a bond. They would eat together, sleep together, watch out for each other at all times. They called themselves camp sisters, and they did everything in their power to help each other live another day. If one of them was sick or starving, they would pool together their meager rations and feed her. If one was about to faint during the long hours of roll call where you had to stand in the snow and the rain and the cold just in thin rags, they would hold her up. They would share their threadbare blankets with each other and actually keep each other warm with their bodies. Near the end, when the Germans were losing the war, they tried to escape, but they wouldn't leave their Jewish prisoners behind, and they forced them to walk for days through the snow in an attempt to get away from the Russians at this point. If one of these Jewish people stopped or fell, you were automatically shot. It was called the Death March. And the strongest camp sisters would carry the weakest in their arms as long as there was any breath of life left. They also supported each other psychologically and emotionally. One of the most famous instances took place in the Terezin concentration camp, where a group of starving Jewish women surrounded by suffering and deprivation and death everywhere, they would spend their evenings talking and describing the recipes of the foods and meals they used to make in their normal lives. And they wrote down these recipes, and they made this food, this description, a sustenance. It was a spiritual and emotional sustenance. And they hoped one day, as they described these beautiful, delicious foods, that they would someday be able to cook them again. They substituted memory for food and kept their humanity alive. This handwritten cookbook was smuggled out of the camp and years later found its way to the surviving daughter of one of the cooks and was published. And we're going to show in our first slide the book. It's called In Memory's Kitchen. In Memory's Kitchen, A Legacy from the Women of Terezin. This is actually a book. You could get it on Amazon, and it tells the story of the women as well as the recipes that they shared with each other. Thank you, Dina. The Talmud is a huge collection of Jewish laws and discussions and philosophies and stories by our greatest sages and rabbis. It spans over 600 years. And one of these sections is called The Ethics of the Fathers. This is a collection of short little sayings containing what I think are the greatest, and in my opinion, most profound wisdom, Jewish wisdom and advice given by our sages on how to live a meaningful and fulfilling life. And in the very first chapter, because they thought it was so important, they wrote, second slide, please, acquire for yourself a friend. Now, notice that they don't say friends. It's in the singular, because a real friend is a rare and precious commodity, and it's great to have many, but really you just need one. And look at these two women looking at each other. You can tell they were friends for a long time. I myself went to 3 different colleges, 4 if you count graduate school. My freshman year, I went to Northwestern. My sophomore year, I went all the way to Tel Aviv University in Israel. Then for my last 2 years, I went to the University of Illinois. And then I went to Yale Drama School for graduate school. And each time I moved to a new place, I didn't know a soul. But I quickly figured out that the first thing I needed to do when I got there was make a friend. A girlfriend, not a guy, because we all know the implications and pressures of that. I needed someone I could hang out with and eat meals with and talk to about whatever was bothering me. So interestingly, the rabbis of the Talmud believe the same thing. How does one acquire a friend? By eating and drinking with him, in our case with her, studying and debating with her, lodging with her, by sharing private thoughts regarding life. This is how you make a friend. This is the intimacy that creates a strong friendship. Think about it. Think about your closest friends and what connects you so tightly. What do you talk about? What do you share? What have you done together? What have you agreed and disagreed with? Because friends can disagree. What have you learned from each other? I recently read a beautiful quote which read, "Finding a true friend is like finding a second self." This is what I was looking for in college. This is what I still look for in a friend. Friends like Dina, she's going to blush, with whom I've been friends for 50 years. So we have not only eaten and drank together, we have lived together, traveled together, laughed together, cried together, shown up for each other at the best of times and the worst of times, shared our deepest fears and anxieties, and it didn't matter how we looked, how much we weighed, how neurotic we were acting, we knew we'd still be accepted and loved. Now, I am pretty sure, and I hope that you have a friend or friends like this. Not a lot of acquaintances or Facebook friends, but someone who really knows who you are and appreciates and loves you. It could be your spouse, it could be your sibling, or it could be a person in your life who you consider your closest friend. According to Shasta Nelson, author of an interesting title, Frientimacy, How to Deepen Friendships for Lifelong Health and Happiness, close friendships are emotional health clubs, the gyms for our souls. They are where we get to be our most vulnerable, where we get to practice being the best versions of ourselves, and sometimes even the worst versions. Please go to the next slide. In the Bible, in the book of Ecclesiastes, which was written 3,000 years ago, it is written, "Two are better than one, because they have good reward for their labor. For if they fall, the one will lift up," they said his, but I changed it to her fellow. "But woe to her that is alone when she falls, for she has not another to help her up." As I said, this was written 3,000 years ago, and this piece of Jewish wisdom reinforces what modern scientists have finally discovered. Having a close friend or a group of close friends is essential to your physical and mental well-being and can actually extend your life. So here are some of the benefits of friendship. Please show the next slide. Number one, having a close friend gives you physical and emotional strength. Researchers followed nearly 750 adults, mostly who were older women, for 12 years to assess the power of friendship in keeping one's health from deteriorating. You have to stay back, Dina, don't move on yet. That's okay. After losing a spouse. Over the course of the study, they looked at the physical health differences between those who lost a spouse and who had a close friend, and people who suffered a loss and only had family support. They learned that having support from relatives didn't have the same positive health benefits, like feeling less depressed, that were associated with close friends. In other words, you felt better and you were healthier with a close friend, even more than the support from your family. It was the girlfriend, it was the friend that helped these women after they lost their husbands. Number two, friends help improve our immune system. People with friends and strong social support tend to have stronger immunity. It actually gives you stronger immunity. Their bodies show better anti-inflammatory responses to disease and wound healing, leading to better health and reduced risk of illness. And number three, friends help secure our heart health. Our friends are health tonics. They encourage healthy reactions in our body and help reduce the production of the stress hormone called cortisol, which is a well-known contributor to heart disease. People with great friends have shown to have fewer inflammatory chemicals in their blood, which in turn leads to a healthier heart and stronger arteries. Number four, friends enhance our self-confidence. Our friends act as our support system. They are our biggest critics and greatest admirers. Their constructive suggestions, praises, and reassurance helps to increase our self-worth and boost our self-confidence. Friendship can be one of the most gratifying relationships we will ever build. Number five, friends keep our minds sharp. Friends keep us away from various mental health disorders too. Not only do they help relieve stress and worry, but they also decrease the risk of psychiatric conditions like dementia, which is associated with loneliness. So having friends doing things that keep your mind sharp together, a book club, a discussion group, all the WCA things that you do, this is helping your mind stay strong and prevent dementia and other emotional or psychiatric conditions. Number six, friends help us improve our social habits. Yes, I only take a walk usually when I have a friend with me. Not that motivated to do it on my own. Good friends act as our social influencers and promote healthy habits in us, whether it's influencing our diet and exercise. They have shown that friends help you lose weight, actually, for many reasons, not just that they support your diet, but when you're not so depressed or lonely, you tend not to use food as company. It helps us stay active, and our friends encourage us to swap our bad habits with good ones and bring about healthy and meaningful change in us. You know, it's only your friend who's going to say, I'm worried about your smoking, I'm worried about what you're eating, you're drinking. It's a close friend that you can listen to. Actually, there's a woman in my congregation who works out with a group of women. She was in her late 70s, and they were talking about mammograms. And this woman said, "Oh, I don't get them anymore. You know, I'm in my late 70s. I don't need one." And her girlfriends were appalled. They said, you have to get a mammogram." And she said, "No." And they pressured her to get a mammogram. And it turned out she actually had breast cancer, and they saved her life. So this is what friends can do. And number 7, friends can help us recover more quickly from illness. Friends play a crucial role in helping us live healthily or recover from a chronic illness. They boost our morale and put us on a recovery path so that we can quickly recover from our diseases and illness. And I'm going to read you a story. I'm going to tell you a story about a group of women who did just that. But it says in the Talmud, when you visit or help someone who is sick, you actually remove 1/60th of their pain. When you comfort or reach out to them, you relieve some of their suffering. And I would suggest that this is not just illness, but grief, which is a kind of illness. When you visit or comfort a mourner, you also remove 1/60th of their sorrow and sadness. And finally, friends can help you live longer. Adults with strong social connections have a reduced risk of many significant health problems, including, go back, not ready. No. Can you go back, Dina, to the last photo? If you can. Okay. Including depression. No. It's part of the benefits of friendship. Okay. Anyway, why don't you just take off everything right now? Stop the photos for a moment. Okay. So adults with strong social, what does friendship prevent or can help? Depression, high blood pressure, unhealthy body mass. And it's found that older adults who have meaningful relationships and social support are likely to live longer than their peers with fewer connections. So in his new book, this man, Jeffrey Zaslow, wrote a book called The Girls from Ames, a story of women and a 40-year friendship. He tells the story of 11 childhood friends who scattered from Ames, Iowa to all over the country and stayed connected. Despite the distance, their friendships endured through college and marriage, divorce, and other crises, including the death of one of the women. And the role of friendship in their health and well-being is evident in his book in every chapter. So here's a little bit of their story. When Kelly Zwagerman, a high school teacher who lives in Northfield, Minnesota, received a diagnosis of breast cancer in September 2007, her doctor told her to surround herself with loved ones. Instead, she reached out to her childhood friends, even though they lived far away. The first people I told were the women from Ames, she said. I emailed them. I immediately had emails and phone calls and messages of support. It was instant that the love poured in from all of them. When she complained that her treatment led to painful sores in her throat, an Ames girl sent a smoothie maker and recipes. Another, who had lost a daughter to leukemia, sent Ms. Wagerman a hand-knitted hat, knowing her head would be cold without hair. Another sent pajamas made of special fabric to help cope with night sweats. Mrs. Wagerman said she was often more comfortable discussing her illness with her girlfriends than her doctor. We go so far back that these women will talk about anything, she said. She said her friends from Ames had been an essential factor in her treatment and recovery, and research bears her out. In 2006, a study of nearly 8,000 nurses with breast cancer found that women without close friends were 4 times likely to die from the disease than women with close friends. And notably, this is so interesting, proximity, meaning you didn't have to live nearby, you just had to hear from them. And the amount of contact with a friend wasn't associated with survival. Just having friends was protective. Interestingly, this is interesting. In the study of these nurses with breast cancer, having a spouse was not associated with survival. So being married is great, but that's not what, according to the study, made the difference. It was friends that had you 4 times less likely to die. While many friendships study the focus is on women, they showed that men also benefit. In a 6-year study of 736 middle-aged Swedish men, attachment to a single person didn't appear to affect the risk of a heart attack, but having a friend or friends did. So again, if you have a wife, yes, but having men friends really made the difference. And they're not even sure why friendship has such a big effect. When friends run errands and pick up medicine for a sick person, the benefits go well beyond the physical assistance. It's not just people who do things for you, it's just people who connect with you and support you on a very profound level. People with stronger friendships feel like there is someone they can turn to, said Karen Roberto, a director in the Center for Gerontology in Virginia. Friendship is an undervalued resource. The consistent message of these studies is friends make your life better. Okay, so now we know the amazing benefits of having wonderful friends, but how do we, as the Talmud tells us, acquire these special friends? And more importantly, how do we keep them in our lives? How do we maintain lifelong friendships despite distance and family obligations and illness and simply lack of time? I know a lot of us, I'm guilty too. I have really good friends on the East Coast, and how it's sometimes hard to stay in touch, even though I love them and value them. So this is what psychology offers us. Psychology Today offers us 5 important tips on how to keep your friendships strong through the years. Now the list, Dina, starting with be honest. Okay, yes. So just keep this now. Be honest. Relationships built on false buildups or phony facades are only as good as their foundation, and superficial relationships fizzle over time. To have a solid friendship, you have to be honest with each other. You have to be able to offer and receive feedback and have some, from someone you trust. You have to be offered to receive feedback from someone you trust so you really hear them. The thing about a friend is they can say things to you, as I mentioned before, that no one else will say. Friends can ask the tough questions like, why do you think you're attracted to that person? Or do you think you might be feeling jealous or hurt in this situation? Your friend can pinpoint what's going on with you and ask, and it's coming from a loving place. Repair mistakes. Okay, when you know someone well, you know their strengths and their weaknesses. You know how to cheer them up, but you know how to tear them down. And sometimes in moment of stress, we can say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. I'm so sorry. I took care of everything but this. Okay, I apologize. That's what happens when we wouldn't have had this if we were in person. My phone wouldn't have ring. Anyway, if you do something wrong, and sometimes it's you forgot someone's birthday, you forgot their anniversary, you said something that you shouldn't have said, you shared, a confidence. When you do something wrong, you have to apologize. You have to make it right. And we know there are a lot of friends where we know a friend, or we might be one where you have a falling out and you just don't talk. You Each one is too proud. Each one doesn't want to make the first gesture. But life's too short. And if someone is important to you, just give them a call. They are going to welcome it. She is going to welcome it as you would, and move on. Make time and show appreciation. In other words, you have to make time for your friends. You have to appreciate who they are and tell them. I still remember I was in college. This is one of my closest friends. And we made a date, it was grad school. We made a date to have dinner, and then a boy asked me out. And I canceled on her. And then I went to visit her like a couple of days later, and she came to the door and she said, I'm not friends with people who bump me for a better offer. And I said, I'm so sorry, you're absolutely right. And I never did it again. But she was very clear. She wasn't interested in a friendship with someone who's going to always put her second, or something better is going to come up, or she's a better offer in her mind or my mind. That's not how you show appreciation and make time for friends. Alter your expectations and don't make assumptions. Don't assume you know what's going on. I've had a daughter who was ill, and I was dealing with her, and this woman, we're not that close really, but she called, and said, well, I guess you hate me. You don't want to be friends with me anymore because you didn't call me. And I thought, I didn't call you. You should call me. It's not because of you. It's because I'm overwhelmed with my life. And don't assume that, it's personal. So you have to, not just fill in the blanks, but find out and communicate, because that's what good friends do. And finally, choose compassion over cynicism. If you see somebody doing something, oh, there she goes again, or I'm fed up with her, maybe have more compassion for someone. Even if you decide you can't be close friends anymore, go toward compassion. Another piece of wisdom from the Talmud is give every person the benefit of the doubt. Actually, it's find yourself a friend and give every person the benefit of a doubt, which I think is interesting that they put those two together, meaning how do you you have to overlook things, you have to not suspect things, you have to give people the benefit of the doubt. Why is this so important to keep our friends? Because in a book called The 5 Top Regrets of Dying, the author said that not maintaining friendships is one of people's biggest deathbed regrets. Keeping close friends is an essential part of life that gives us meaning and fulfillment. Like, as people were dying, they, are sick, they said, I wish I'd stayed in touch. Why didn't I stay in touch? I love that person. How did I let that go? So we have to keep that in mind too. So now, I am not unaware that okay, Dina, why don't you just take off that and put me back in the center of this for a sec? I'm not unaware that while I have been talking to you about the power and beauty of friendship, we are all sitting alone and apart in our houses by ourselves looking at screens. I am not aware that some of us have lost dear friends or family over these past 2 years, or have lost touch because of illness or other circumstances. I am not unaware that for many of us, the past 2 years have been the loneliest and the alonest, if there is such a word, time in our lives. I myself live alone, and even though I do have close friends, I barely have seen them over the last 2 years. For many months, I have mostly eaten alone, slept alone, taken walks alone, watched TV and videos alone. I have subscription to 7 streaming services. In the past 2 years, I could say that Netflix and Amazon Prime have been my 2 closest friends. Sometimes the most social interaction I would have would be putting on a mask and going to the supermarket or the pharmacy or the doctor, where I would get to talk to someone in person. Even though it wasn't that personal, at least it was a human. And I have worked with my congregants on Zoom for 2 years. And I know that all of you wonderful women in the WCA have also been meeting on Zoom for 2 years. But as we know, it's not the same. We are participating right now in a Zoom event. And whenever we do that, we just get down to business. We start the group, the class, we listen to the webinar silently like you are, And when it's over, we ask a few questions, we say thank you, goodbye, and leave, just like we will today. There is rarely any time for schmoozing or time to share what's really going on with us, how we're feeling, what we're worried about, how exhausted or numb or depressed we're feeling. There is rarely any time to make the meaningful connections that we need. Not only that, but after 2 years of Zoom, a lot of us are just zoomed out. We're tired of screens. We can't bear to watch one more thing. And yet we're still not comfortable mingling in crowds or going inside restaurants, movie theaters, art galleries, or even into people's homes, or wear masks, which also is a barrier. So there's been so many obstacles to developing these meaningful connections. So where does that leave us? Over the course of the last 2 years, we have been on a roller coaster. Sometimes we feel a little safer and we go out, then, we get the surge or we get the Omicron and we go back to self-isolation and quarantine. And this has massive repercussions, significant repercussions on all of us. According to a new report from the AARP, the coronavirus pandemic is causing an epidemic of loneliness and social isolation among adults. 2/3 of adults say they are experiencing social isolation. 66% say their anxiety levels have increased. I know mine, and our sleep, our overeating, our lack of energy, we've all been feeling some of that. Actually, I don't know if you know this, but even before the pandemic, loneliness was such a terrible situation in England that the Parliament created a ministry of loneliness. There is a minister of loneliness in England to deal with this situation where people will say they don't talk to one human being in a whole month. There's such loneliness. I can only imagine what's going on now. And this whole impact of social distancing and COVID-19 is worse among older adults, and especially women and people of low income. More than half of adults 50 and older report social isolation, meaning an absence of a meaningful social relationship. So now this is so interesting. In the first book of the Torah, in the book of Genesis, it starts with the story of creation, which, as we know, takes 6 days. And if you read the text, at the end of each day, it says, and God saw that it was good. Every day there's the sun, the moon, the stars, the oceans, the earth, the animals, the human beings, and God saw that it was good. It's all good, but then God realizes there's something that's not good. And this is the first mention of not good in the Torah, in the Bible. It says, Lo tov heyot ha'adam levado. It is not good for man, meaning humans, to be alone. The very first time in the Torah that something is considered lo tov, not tov, which is good, but lo tov, not good, is loneliness. And yet in the United States, 1 in 3 people over 65 live alone. By age 85, 1 in 2 people live alone. A recent study of chronic loneliness revealed 1 in 4 American adults reported that they had spoken with no one about something important to them in the past 6 months. And even if we don't live alone, it's very likely that most of us have experienced some degree of loneliness in the past couple of years. So I talked to you about the positive benefits of friendship. Well, here are the negative damages from loneliness. If Dina would show the next list. Okay. No, the next one. Next one. Here we go. Prolonged suffering from loneliness is as bad for you as having diabetes, high blood pressure, or smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And it can increase the risk of death by up to 50%. It's deadlier than obesity. It raises hormones and inflammation. And it also can give you a strong risk of heart disease, stroke. You can develop type 2 diabetes, dementia, and even become suicidal. These are all the terrible things that happen from loneliness. And that is why, okay, Dina, let's take that off because it's too depressing to keep looking at. That is why an organization like the WCA is so important. Not only does it offer you all the opportunities to share your experience together, but you may be actually saving each other's lives. Now, that being said, I would like to encourage you to be sensitive to those among you who may not be doing well. Those of you who are living alone, have lost a loved one, are caretaking their spouses, children, or grandchildren, are battling illness, whether it be physical or mental. I would encourage you, the ladies of the WCA, to reach out to them individually, to call, to text, and now that the pandemic seems to be easing, invite them out for a meal or drop one off. Invite them for a walk, a cup of coffee, or get a manicure together. Do a beauty treatment. I love beauty treatments. I'm going to tell you something very interesting as I conclude. That's probably not too common about myself. Though I am single, besides spending time with my friends and family, my women friends, for many years, I'd say about 5 years or longer, I socialize with 5 different couples, 5 different husband and wives, regularly invite me for dinner to go. Actually, yesterday, do you want to go to a play with us? Go to a play or a movie. One couple that I've known since their wedding, like 35 years, we're planning to go on a vacation together. I am friends with the wife, I'm friends with the husband, and I'm friends with the husband and wife. In fact, in 2 of the situations, I knew the husbands first because we were writing partners, and then I met their wives. And no one's uncomfortable, no one feels weird, and I know a lot of couples don't think, oh, we can't invite an individual, a single man or a single woman. But it's great for all of you. It's a whole new level of conversation, discussion, and it makes such a difference. It's made a huge difference for me. So I end this talk as I began, reminding us all that beyond food and water and shelter and clothing, we need friends to enrich us, to sustain us, to give our lives meaning, to keep us healthy, to keep us happy, to keep us alive. I want to thank you so much for inviting me to speak to you today. And as I close, I would like to share with you these reflections on friendship by 8 iconic women writers whose words surely speak for all of us. Next one, the women. Jane Austen said, "There is nothing I would not do for those who are really my friends. I have no notion of loving people by halves. It is not my nature." Aeneas Nin, each friend represents a world in us, a world possibly not born until they arrive, and it is only by this meeting that a new world is born. Sylvia Plath, there is nothing like puking with somebody to make you into old friends. You know, it's actually sometimes those experiences that make you really close. One's life has value so long as one attributes value to the life of others by means of love, friendship, and compassion. Simone de Beauvoir, one of my heroines, Simone de Beauvoir. Edith Wharton, the great writer. If you're watching, The Gilded Age, it's the years of the life of Edith Wharton. There is one friend in the life of each of us who seems not a separate person, however dear and beloved, but an expansion, an interpretation of oneself, the very meaning of one's soul. Gloria Steinem, my heroine for sure. Women understand. We may share experiences, make jokes, paint pictures, and describe humiliations that mean nothing to men, but women understand. The odd thing about these deep and personal connections of women is that they often ignore barriers of age, economics, worldly experience, race, culture, all the barriers that in male or mixed society had seemed so difficult to cross. Judy Blume, if you didn't read it yourself, you read it to your daughters or your granddaughters. We are friends for life. When we're together, the years fall away. Isn't that what matters? To have someone who can remember with you, to have someone who remembers how far you've come. And finally, Helen Keller. My friends have made the story of my life. In 1,000 ways, they have turned my limitations into beautiful privileges. Thank you so much for allowing me to share this time with you.
Well, thank you, Susan. I have some questions. And number one, two people have asked the title of the book that you mentioned on your second on friendship. And can you send us a list of the books on friendship that you mentioned?
Yeah, I'll send you, it was called Frientimacy, I think. I have to go back to my notes, but I will send you a list of all the books I mentioned, and then you could share it with WCA. I will give you all of them. So I'll do that.
Okay. I have a question from Linda. How do you deal with the fact of losing your two dearest friends?
You know, I lost two of my dearest friends actually not from COVID, but in the last few years. One I knew since third grade. One was my best friend since freshman in college. You can, if you're close to their families, you reach out to their families. You can remember them on the anniversary of their deaths, and you can light candles for them and say blessings for them. You can contribute something in their honor or in their name. And you can honor them by being a good friend to others, remembering them and how they inspired you. But you never get over it. We know that. We just can hold them in our hearts, tell stories about them, share your experiences with them, because when you talk about someone, you actually bring them alive and you feel better. So share stories about your friends with other people who might have known them, or with their kids, or their grandchildren. They would love to hear stories about that. So those are ways that perhaps can help.
Another statement question. I consider my 3 adult sons as my best friends. I wonder how many others feel the same way about their children. Thanks.
You're very lucky, especially mother and sons. That's not very common. I am very close with my daughter, and we consider each other very good friends too. What is the secret of that? It's respect, it's honor, it's honesty, it's seeing each other as a full human being, not just as your kid or as your mom. So that is rare. I don't know how many, but I actually am privileged to have that experience with my daughter.
I have 3 more questions. Joyce Tubb said, my granddaughter used to say, quote, you can live without a brother, but not without a friend. Your thoughts?
Yes, I think it's true. First of all, as we heard from all the research, sometimes you can be more honest with friends. Friends are more comforting. Friends, it depends on the sibling relationship. Sometimes you can't be totally honest with the sibling. You can't tell them everything, especially a boy and a girl, you're very close. But a friend is by choice. A friend is someone you pick, you choose because you feel that connection. I was once standing outside my daughter's nursery school, and this new mom was standing there. And she was this tall woman with really wild curly hair, and she looked worried. And she was obviously Jewish, but I don't know, I'm a bit of a worrier. I just immediately connected with her. And it turned out that her son had allergies, and she was nervous about leaving him with an EpiPen and whatever. But we became very close friends. We chose each other. It's different. Sometimes you have to work harder with a sibling, but a friend is somebody that you choose.
Well, I have 2 more, and they are all compliments. Wonderful talk. And would you, can someone ask for all the copies of the quotes at the end of the presentation? I have that, and is it okay for me to send it on?
Of course.
Okay. And then Sherry Zahler said, great presentation. Thank you so much. I am going to call 2 friends I've been out of touch with now.
I'm going to do
Susan.
the same. I had 2 reactions when I wrote once a much longer piece on loneliness, and I started feeling really lonely while I was writing that piece. And when I read this to you, I thought I need to call a couple of really close friends of my own that I've been out of touch with. So I inspired myself, and I'm glad I inspired you.
Well, I have two more came. Barbara Karp said, I am always saying that I could not have survived life without my friends. And then the last one, I think you have a very careful, I think you have to, I think you have to very careful about how you're bringing up personal criticism with friends. Any comments?
Yes, you do have to be very careful. And I always suggest the sandwich method. It's a psychological method where you start with a compliment, like, I love you, I think you're the greatest, but I'm worried about you because you are drinking so much. And I don't want to lose you. I care so much about you. And I love you, and I'll support you in any way I can. Is there anything I can do for you? So a compliment, then you say the thing you need to say, and then another compliment or word of support. And then the person doesn't just hear the attack, you open them up, and maybe they can hear it. So I've even told that to students, that the sandwich method really works.
I should practice that. On that note, thank you, Susan. I'm going to turn the podium, as they say, to Patty to say, as she closes our talk. Thank you. It was wonderful, dear friend, and I'll talk to you soon.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Susan, for such an inspiring talk. I too feel inspired to reach out to my best friend from high school, and we've lost touch over the years. Thank you all for joining us today. And I want to point out, as Jeffrey mentioned, that under the new Federation policy, we'll be able to start doing things in person as of March 1. You should all find your name tags, which you haven't had to use for over 2 years. And there are a lot of them that are still waiting for pickup at the Federation office. And hopefully we can make some new friends with our name tags when we meet each other in person. Treasure your friends. They are priceless. If we've learned nothing else from this pandemic, that would be it. And Susan, you are an honorary WCA member. Thank you so much for your presentation, and I hope we'll see you sometime in Naples.
Me too.
Thank you all for coming, and hopefully we will see you soon. And by the way, mark your calendars for Wednesday, November 9th at Arthrex, the new center that they have built on Immokalee Road. We are planning to have our next season welcome back lunch then. Obviously, there'll be lots of information about that, and let's just hope that we can do it in person. We haven't been able to do a big event like that in so long. So send out good vibes for in person and make all this COVID stuff go away. We're sick of it, but we have our friends to get us through. So thank you all. Have a great day. Bye.